Steph Ferrier, thank you.
And we, of course, asked the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews and other relevant ministers to come on the show this morning to defend their decision. The Premier declined, as did the other ministers. We can, though, bring in now the Victorian Opposition Leader, John Pesutto. He's in the studio. Mr Pesutto, good morning to you.
Hey, Michael.
Now, pretend you're the Premier and you were told, and we take him at his word at the moment, that the cost of the Games has blown out from $2.6 billion to $7 billion. What would Premier John Pesutto do, who I understand wants to be fiscally responsible?
Yeah, we wouldn't have entered it if we had done the work last year. Remember, Daniel Andrews and his government spruiked this for the last 12 months. And when you look back at their statements, they confidently talked about hosting the Games in regional Victoria. We all got behind it based on the numbers that the government was publishing. And only 7 weeks ago, Michael, in the state budget, the costings had it at about $2.6 billion. So how do you get to $7 billion all of a sudden? He's looking for scapegoats. This is an omni-shambles.
Do you think those figures are dodgy, being quoted by the Premier?
I don't believe anything this government says. It's a dodge, and it casts now question marks over everything else the government is doing. The damage to our reputation, not just Victoria's, but I know we have a national audience and the nation will pay a price for this. Victoria is one of our preeminent states, the second largest. It can't afford to be trashing our reputation internationally.
What about the decision to host the Games on a regional basis? So cities like Bendigo, Ballarat, Geelong, was that flawed in your view?
I don't think the concept was flawed, but everybody, myself included, my colleagues, stakeholders, the Victorian community, all rested on the government's assertions about the finances. They have access to all of the data, all of the costings. So everybody wanted to get behind this. Everybody wanted it to be a success. But as it turns out now, it was all based on a lie. And somebody has to be held responsible. We can't have this kind of damage being done to our nation's reputation, and in particular Victoria, where, as you know, for decades, we have proudly talked about our capacity to deliver major events.
Oh, yeah, but on that front, Melbourne has the Formula One Grand Prix, Melbourne has the Australian Open Tennis, Melbourne has international golf tournaments, Melbourne has the AFL Grand Final. It's
for now. For now.
Yeah, but it's not really going to affect the city's sporting reputation, this decision.
Oh, well, don't take
those other events aren't going anywhere, the big ones, international ones.
Well, they better not, and it's the government's responsibility while it's in office to make sure they don't go anywhere else. But don't take my word for it. Look at what Craig Phillips said yesterday. Head of the Commonwealth Games Association made the point that others internationally will look at Victoria and ask, is there a sovereign risk now around anything Victoria says and does? And for Victorians, and in fact for new governments around the country, look at the Andrews model and avoid it, because what yesterday's humiliating announcement shows is that the whole Andrews project is a dodge. Suburban roll-up is $200 billion. The SEC that it's spruiking, the childcare package it announced last year, all now come into question about whether they can be delivered and whether they're based on truthful data and costings.
You're calling for responsibility, you're calling for accountability. In your view, what form should that take?
Well, if ministerial accountability in our Westminster system is to mean anything, the ministers directly responsible should be taking some responsibility.
Resign.
And possibly stepping down, yes. You've got Jacinta Allen, you've got Steve Demopoulos.
Should the Premier quit in your
Well,
your
will he? Has he ever taken accountability?
Is that your view?
Well, what I've said in recent months is that he should consider his position, because we now have so many problems in Victoria, whether it's corruption, whether it's cost blowouts and just rank incompetence, culminating in yesterday's humiliating international announcement. I've asked him to take responsibility and consider his position, because the key point for our viewers is that while Daniel Andrews remains in his position, nothing will change. And my concern is that now there is a question mark over everything the Andrews government does. There's a kind of dodginess now, a con about everything it promotes.
Are you worried there could be a compensation bill down the track as well, on top of the money already put aside by Victoria to host now the now dumped Games?
I'm not so much worried about it as I am certain about it. There will be direct compensation that we will now need to pay because of this incompetence by the Andrews government. But it's more than that. It's all of the unseen costs now that are going to take the form of events that won't come here now because people may look at more reliable jurisdictions. There are the costs about businesses looking elsewhere to go. So it's not just the direct cancellation costs. And then there's the human element, the athletes whose hopes and aspirations have been dashed by this opportunity. As we know, the Commonwealth Games has always been a stepping stone to bigger things for our athletes here in Australia. So, you know, there's those costs. There's also, I think, a broader concern about the Commonwealth Games themselves now and what we've done to damage its future prospects. And whatever your view about the Commonwealth Games, any vehicle that brings so many nations and peoples together has to be a good thing. And what Daniel Andrews and his ministers did yesterday was trash it.
John Pesutto, I appreciate